The conference room at St. Michael's Hospital felt smaller than it was, or perhaps it was just the weight of what was about to happen that made the walls seem closer. I sat at the polished table with my hands folded, dressed in a simple navy cardigan and slacks, my silver hair pulled back in the same neat bun I'd worn for 43 years. Across from me sat my son Marcus, 38 years old, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His wife Vanessa perched beside him in designer sunglasses she hadn't bothered to remove indoors, her manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm on her phone case. Dr. Chen sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral in the way doctors learn to master. To my right was someone Marcus hadn't expected to see, Patricia Holbrook, my attorney for the past 6 weeks, her leather briefcase resting on the table between us like a loaded weapon. "Mom, this is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice carrying that edge of exasperation I'd heard so often lately. "We need to talk about Dad's care plan like adults. Why did you bring a lawyer to a family meeting?" "Because this stopped being a family meeting 3 months ago," I replied quietly. My voice didn't shake. After everything I'd been through, after all the tears I'd cried alone in hospital corridors and empty parking lots, I'd found something unexpected in the depths of my grief: steel. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "This is so typical. Playing the victim when we're just trying to help." Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should review Mr. Whitmore's current status before." "We know his status," Marcus interrupted. "He's been on that ventilator for 4 months with no meaningful improvement. Mom's burning through their savings on a fantasy." He turned to me, and something in his eyes looked almost like pity. It was worse than anger. "Dad wouldn't want this. You know he wouldn't want to exist like this, hooked up to machines, while you drain his life insurance and refuse to make practical decisions." "Practical decisions," I repeated softly. "Is that what you're calling it now? The house, Mom." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice taking on that syrupy tone she used when she wanted something. "The market is perfect right now. You could get 700,000, maybe more. That money could cover Dad's care in a nice facility while you downsize to something manageable. Something closer to us, where we could help you." "Help me." The words tasted like acid in the air between us. Patricia's hand moved slightly, a small gesture that told me to wait, to let them keep talking, to let them dig deeper. She'd taught me patience over these past weeks, patience I'd never known I possessed. "A facility," I said. "You mean a nursing home? You want me to sell the house your father and I built with our own hands, the house where you grew up, where we celebrated every Christmas and birthday, where your father planted roses for me every anniversary." My voice remained steady, almost conversational. "And you want me to use that money to move him to a facility while I rent a studio apartment somewhere and wait for him to die? Jesus Christ, Mom, don't be so dramatic." Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so much like his father's it made my heart ache. "Nobody's saying wait for him to die. We're saying accept reality." "The doctors said." "The doctors said there's minimal brain activity," Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "But I didn't say there was no hope. Mrs. Whitmore has been very clear about wanting to continue treatment, and while the prognosis is uncertain." "Uncertain." Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. "He's gone, and she's too stubborn to see it. Meanwhile, she's sitting on $750,000 in real estate, refusing to be sensible, refusing to think about her own future." "My future," I said. The words hung in the air like smoke. "Tell me, Marcus. In this future you're so concerned about, where exactly do I fit? In the studio apartment? Or somewhere even smaller?" Something flickered across his face, guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at being challenged. Vanessa's nails stopped tapping. "That's not fair," Marcus said. "We're thinking about you. About what happens when the money runs out, when you're alone and broke and Dad is still." He stopped himself, but the words hung unspoken in the air. "Still alive. Still costing money. Still in the way." Patricia finally spoke, her voice crisp and professional. "I think this is an appropriate time to review some documents." She opened her briefcase, and I watched Marcus's expression shift from irritation to confusion as she pulled out a thick folder. "What documents?" Vanessa sat up straighter. "This meeting is about medical decisions, not legal." Oh, it's absolutely about legal matters, Patricia said smoothly. She slid the first page across the table. This is a restraining order application. Filed 2 days ago. Against both of you. The color drained from Marcus's face. What the hell are you talking about? We're talking about the 23 documented instances of harassment, coercion, and financial exploitation attempts over the past 4 months. Patricia's finger tapped each page as she laid them out like cards in a poker game. Text messages. Recorded phone calls. Witness statements from hospital staff. And this, she placed a final document in the center of the table, is a fraud investigation opened by the state attorney's office yesterday morning. The room went silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. You see, I said softly, leaning forward just slightly, I'm not the fragile, grief-stricken old woman you thought I was. I'm Thomas Whitmore's wife. And I'm done being anyone's victim. They had no idea what was coming. 4 months earlier, everything had been different. Not perfect, life is never perfect when you're 65 and watching the man you've loved for 43 years struggle with congestive heart failure, but it was ours. Thomas and I had built a life together that meant something, in a house that meant something, in a community where we were known and loved. The house on Maple Street wasn't grand by anyone's standards. It was a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, set back from the road behind the oak trees Thomas had planted the year Marcus was born. But we'd designed it ourselves, worked with the contractor to get every detail right, saved for 5 years to afford it. Thomas had laid the hardwood floors in the living room by hand. I'd painted every bedroom, chosen every light fixture, planted every flower in the garden that became my sanctuary. We'd raised Marcus there. Taught him to ride a bike on that driveway. Measured his height on the doorframe in the kitchen every birthday until he was 16 and too cool for such things. Hosted his little league teams for pizza parties. Cried together in the master bedroom the night he left for college. Thomas had been a civil engineer, steady and reliable, the kind of man who showed love through actions rather than words. He built me a reading nook in the bay window overlooking the garden. He never forgot our anniversary. He held my hand through 2 miscarriages and my mother's funeral and the terrifying year when my breast cancer came back. He was my rock, my partner, my home. The heart failure had started slowly, too slowly for us to notice at first. Fatigue Thomas blamed on getting older. Shortness of breath he attributed to being out of shape. By the time we understood how serious it was, his ejection fraction was down to 25%. But he'd been stable on medication, managing, living. Then came the pneumonia. It hit fast and hard in early January, turning into sepsis before we fully understood what was happening. I found him collapsed in the bathroom at 3 a.m, his lips blue, his breathing shallow. The ambulance ride felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The ICU doctors spoke in careful tones about organ failure and ventilator support and uncertain outcomes. He's strong, they said. We'll support him and see how he responds. For the first 3 weeks, I practically lived at the hospital. I held Thomas's hand, read him passages from the books he loved, played recordings of his favorite Sinatra songs. Marcus visited twice in those early weeks, staying for maybe 20 minutes each time, uncomfortable in the presence of machines and medical terminology. Vanessa came once, took a selfie in the waiting room with a caption about family strength, and never returned. I understood, in a way. Death makes people uncomfortable. Hospitals remind us of our own mortality. Marcus had always been squeamish about illness, fainting at the sight of blood even as a child. But then something shifted. It started with a phone call at 2 a.m, 3 weeks into Thomas's hospitalization. Marcus's voice on the line, slightly slurred. He'd been drinking. Mom, we need to talk about reality. About Dad's prognosis. About what happens next. He's stable, I'd said, foggy with exhaustion. The doctors think. The doctors are being paid to keep him alive, Marcus interrupted. But that's not living, Mom. You need to think about quality of life. About whether Dad would want this. About the costs. The costs. That was the first time he mentioned it, but it wouldn't be the last. Over the following weeks, as Thomas remained on the ventilator, as the bills accumulated, As the medical team began cautiously mentioning long-term rehabilitation facilities, Marcus's calls became more frequent and more pointed. He started bringing up the house, casually at first, then with increasing urgency. "You can't maintain that place alone, Mom. The property taxes are insane. You could be sitting on easy money. Dad would want you to be practical." Vanessa joined the chorus, sending me real estate listings with cheerful messages about fresh starts and senior-friendly condos. She found a realtor friend who happened to call me one evening, somehow having my number, ready to do a market evaluation. I said no. Again and again, I said no. The house was our home. Selling it felt like giving up on Thomas, like erasing our life together before he'd even had a chance to fight his way back. And he was fighting. Slowly, incrementally, his numbers were improving. His oxygen saturation crept higher. His sedation levels decreased. There were moments when his eyes tracked movement, when I could swear he squeezed my hand in response to my voice. Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic. Brain injury from sepsis is unpredictable. Some patients surprise us. The next few weeks are critical. But Marcus didn't want to hear about surprises or critical weeks. He wanted resolution. He wanted me to sign the papers authorizing the removal of life support. He wanted access to Dad's life insurance policy, not a fortune, but enough to matter. He wanted the house on the market. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. I was sitting beside Thomas's bed, reading aloud from a biography of Patton, one of Thomas's heroes, when Marcus walked in without knocking. Vanessa was with him, wearing a tight dress and heels completely inappropriate for a hospital visit. They didn't look at Thomas. They looked at me. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice carrying a new edge I'd never heard before, "we need to talk. About the ventilator. About your finances. About being realistic instead of selfish." That word, selfish, hit me like a slap. And in that moment, standing in the ICU room where my husband fought for every breath, I saw my son clearly for perhaps the first time in years. He wasn't here out of concern for his father's dignity or my well-being. He was here because somewhere along the way, he'd started counting the money before Thomas was even gone. And that changed everything. "Selfish," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're calling me selfish? Look at yourself, Mom." Vanessa gestured toward me with one manicured hand, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You're exhausted. You've lost weight. You're spending every day in this depressing place watching Dad not improve, burning through money that could secure your future, our future, for what? Pride? Denial? For my husband," I said, my hands clenching in my lap. "For the man I've loved for 43 years. For your father, Marcus. How can you even? Dad is gone." Marcus exploded, his voice loud enough that a passing nurse glanced through the glass door. He lowered his volume but not his intensity. "His brain is fried from oxygen deprivation. He's not coming back. And you sitting here pretending otherwise is just selfish sentimentality that's going to leave you broke and alone." The doctors said. "The doctors are covering their asses legally," Marcus cut me off. "They'll never tell you to pull the plug because they're afraid of lawsuits. But I've done research, Mom. I've talked to specialists. Cases like Dad's. The chances of meaningful recovery are less than 5%. You're betting everything on a miracle that isn't coming." He pulled a chair close to mine, his voice softening in a way that felt practiced, rehearsed. "I know this is hard. I know you love him. But love means letting go sometimes. It means not letting him exist in this twilight state. It means thinking about your own life, your own needs. And the house." I asked quietly, "Does thinking about my own needs include selling my home?" Vanessa sat on the arm of Marcus's chair, creating a united front. "It's not just about the house. It's about everything. You're 65 years old, Mom. What happens when your own health fails? When you need care? Dad's medical bills have already eaten through $40,000 of savings. The insurance caps out at 6 months of ventilator care. Then what? You'll lose the house anyway when you can't afford the mortgage and the medical bills." "The house is paid off," I said. "The property taxes aren't," Marcus countered. "Neither is the maintenance, the utilities, the upkeep. You're sitting on $700,000 in equity while Dad drains every other asset you have. It's financial suicide, and we're trying to save you from yourself. I looked at my son, this man who had my eyes and his father's jawline, who I'd rocked through nightmares and cheered at soccer games, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart breaking. Something harder. Something that had been holding me together through sympathy and maternal instinct. When did you calculate it? I asked. Calculate what? The equity. The insurance payout. The value of your father's life measured against property values. My voice remained calm, but I felt it beneath the surface, a cold anger I'd never experienced before. When did you decide $700,000 was worth more than your father's chance at survival? Marcus's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Fair? I almost laughed. You want to talk about fair? Your father worked 60-hour weeks to pay for your college. Took out a second mortgage to cover your graduate school when your scholarships didn't pan out. Loaned you and Vanessa $40,000 for your wedding that you never paid back. He sacrificed everything for you, and now he's a vegetable. Marcus shouted, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. And you're clinging to a corpse while our inheritance evaporates. Yes, I said it, our inheritance. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You pretending money doesn't matter, that we shouldn't think practically about what happens to Dad's estate, to the house, to everything he worked for. Estate, I repeated. The word tasted like poison. He's not dead, Marcus. Your father is alive. Breathing. Fighting. And you're already dividing up his belongings. Someone has to be realistic. Vanessa stood too, her voice sharp. Someone has to think about the future instead of wallowing in denial. We've been patient, Mom. We've tried to be gentle about this. But you're not listening to reason, so let me be blunt. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to something she'd apparently prepared in advance. Here. I had a lawyer look at the situation. If you keep refusing to make medical decisions in Dad's best interest, and yes, withdrawing futile care counts as his best interest, we can petition for medical guardianship. We can prove you're not acting rationally, that you're letting emotions override Dad's dignity and your own financial survival. The words hit me like ice water. You would sue me for guardianship over my own husband. If that's what it takes to stop this madness. Marcus's face had gone red. To stop you from wasting everything Dad built, everything we're entitled to, on a lost cause. He's already gone, Mom. You're just too stubborn to accept it. Entitled, I said softly. You think you're entitled to his life insurance. To our house. To declare him dead while his heart is still beating. Stop being dramatic, Vanessa snapped. This is about practicality. About accepting that sometimes loving someone means letting them go with dignity instead of keeping them alive as a science experiment. About securing your future and ours instead of flushing everything down the toilet on false hope. I looked between them, my son and his wife, standing in judgment over me, over Thomas, over our entire life together. And I realized something that should have been obvious weeks ago. This wasn't about Thomas's dignity or my well-being or medical reality. This was about money. Pure and simple. They had calculated the cost of compassion and found it too expensive. Get out, I said. Mom. Get out of this room. Get out of this hospital. And don't come back until you remember that the man in this bed is your father, not an obstacle to your bank account. Marcus's face hardened. You're making a mistake. When the money runs out, when you're facing foreclosure and have nowhere to turn, don't expect us to bail you out. We tried to help. We tried to make you see reason. What happens next is on you. They left, Vanessa's heels clicking sharply against the linoleum, Marcus not looking back once at his father's still form in the hospital bed. I sat alone in the sudden silence, holding Thomas's warm hand, feeling the steady beep of the heart monitor, and I knew two things with absolute certainty. My son had shown me who he really was. And I was going to have to protect my husband and myself from our own child. For 3 days after that confrontation, I didn't call Marcus back. I didn't answer his texts or Vanessa's increasingly aggressive messages about thinking clearly and considering options. I sat with Thomas, talked to him about everything we'd built together, and I planned. The first thing I did was document everything. Every text message, every voicemail, every conversation I could remember. I created a timeline starting from that first 2 a.m. phone call weeks earlier, noting every time Marcus mentioned money or the house or suggesting we withdraw care. I'm not a sophisticated woman. I spent my career as a paralegal, decent pay but nothing glamorous, and retired at 63 when Thomas's health started declining. But I knew how to organize information. I knew how to build a case. On the fourth day, I had a visitor I didn't expect. Nurse Rebecca Chan had been part of Thomas's care team since day one, a tiny woman with iron-grey hair and eyes that missed nothing. She knocked softly on the ICU room door during her afternoon rounds, then stepped inside with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have a moment?" "Of course." I set down the book I'd been reading aloud to Thomas. "Is something wrong with his vitals?" No. His numbers are actually improving slightly. I wanted to talk about something else." She glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but my conscience won't let me stay quiet. "It's about your son." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" 3 days ago, after that argument you had, he came back. You'd gone to the cafeteria. He was alone in here with your husband for about 10 minutes. She paused, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't in the room, but I was at the nurse's station. I could hear through the intercom we use to monitor patients. "What did you hear?" Rebecca pulled out her phone, her hands shaking slightly. "I recorded it. I know I probably shouldn't have, but something felt wrong. He wasn't talking to his father. He was on his phone, and..." She handed me an earbud. "Just listen." I listened. And my blood ran cold. Marcus's voice, speaking to someone on the phone, his words casual and calculating. "Yeah, I'm at the hospital now. She finally left for a few minutes. No, she's not going to sign anything willingly. We're going to have to go the guardianship route. I know it takes time, but the lawyer said we have a strong case, financial irresponsibility, emotional decision-making, all that. The house alone is worth 700,000, minimum. Plus the life insurance, the 401k. Exactly. Mom gets a cheap apartment, Dad's care gets withdrawn, and we're looking at maybe 800,000 clear once everything settles. I know, babe. Finally. Just need to wait out these next few months of ventilator coverage, then we can push harder on the futile care argument." The recording went on for 7 minutes. Every word was a knife. I pulled out the earbud with shaking hands. His planning to take guardianship. To force me out of medical decisions. I know. Rebecca's voice was gentle. "I'm so sorry. I wanted you to know what you're dealing with. I've seen this before, families fighting over finances while someone they supposedly love is fighting for their life. But I've never seen it quite this cold. Will you testify to this? If it comes to that?" "Absolutely." She squeezed my hand. "I'll also talk to the attending physicians. Make sure they document that your husband is showing improvement, that continuing care is medically reasonable. Your son might be pushing this narrative about futile care, but Dr. Chen doesn't believe that. None of us do." After Rebecca left, I sat alone with the weight of that recording on my phone. I thought about calling Marcus, confronting him. But something stopped me, an instinct I didn't fully understand yet. He thought I was weak. Emotional. Irrational with grief. Let him keep thinking that. Let him believe I was just a stubborn old woman clinging to false hope. Meanwhile, I would prepare. The next morning, I made an appointment with Patricia Holbrook, a family attorney I'd found through a friend at church. Patricia was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with a reputation for handling elder abuse cases. When I played her Rebecca's recording, her expression didn't change, but I saw her hand tighten on her pen. "How much has your son actually contributed to your husband's care?" she asked. "Nothing. He hasn't paid for anything. Thomas's insurance covers most of it, and I'm covering the rest from our savings. And the house? In both our names. Joint ownership with right of survivorship. Patricia made notes. So even if something happens to Thomas, the house becomes yours automatically. Your son has no legal claim to it. Not unless. I swallowed hard. Not unless they successfully get guardianship over me too. That's what they're planning, isn't it? To prove I'm incompetent, get control of Thomas's care, withdraw life support, and then take guardianship over me and my assets. That's exactly what they're planning. Patricia's voice was grim. And unfortunately, it's more common than you'd think. Adult children convincing courts that elderly parents can't make sound decisions, especially in emotional situations like end-of-life care. But we're not going to let that happen. Over the next 4 weeks, Patricia became my secret weapon. We filed a preemptive action with the probate court, establishing my competency through psychiatric evaluation and financial review. We gathered statements from friends, neighbors, my former employer, and my financial advisor, all testifying to my sound judgment and independent decision-making. We documented my careful management of Thomas's care, my consultations with multiple specialists, my reasonable financial planning. We also gathered evidence about Marcus. It turned out Rebecca wasn't the only hospital staff member who'd noticed his behavior. A social worker reported his inappropriate questions about insurance payouts. A billing administrator mentioned his requests for copies of all medical invoices. Another nurse had overheard him arguing with Vanessa in the parking lot about speeding this up. Then there was the financial investigation. Patricia suggested we hire a forensic accountant to review the $40,000 Thomas had loaned Marcus for the wedding. What we found was stunning. Marcus had reported that money as a gift on his tax returns, avoiding gift tax by claiming it came in increments under the annual exclusion limit. But we had the original bank transfer showing it as a single lump sum and the promissory note Thomas had made him sign, promising repayment. Marcus had committed tax fraud, using his father's generosity as cover. "This is enough," Patricia said during one of our meetings. "We can threaten criminal charges if he doesn't back off. But I want to give you another option." "What option?" "We wait. We let him think he's winning. Let him file for guardianship if that's what he's planning. And then we destroy him in court with everything we have. Not just defeating his case, humiliating him. Making it public record that he tried to manipulate his own dying father's care for financial gain." I thought about Thomas, lying in that hospital bed, slowly fighting his way back toward consciousness. I thought about the doctors telling me they were seeing more responsiveness, more signs of awareness. I thought about the possibility that someday, Thomas might wake up fully and learn what his own son had tried to do. "No," I said finally. "I don't want to humiliate him. I want to stop him. I want him to face consequences, but I also want." I struggled to find the words. "I want there to be a chance, someday, for him to understand what he's done wrong. To change. To become the man his father raised him to be." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then we do this carefully. We gather everything, build an ironclad case, but we offer him an off-ramp. A chance to walk away if he agrees to certain conditions." "What conditions?" "A formal agreement that he will not pursue guardianship. A confession about the tax fraud and repayment of the loan with interest. A restraining order keeping him away from you and your husband unless invited. And most importantly," she looked at me seriously, "a recorded apology to his father. On video. Something that can never be erased. And if he refuses, then we go nuclear. Criminal charges, public trial, the works. But we give him the choice. That's more mercy than he's shown you." I agreed. And for the next 2 weeks, while Marcus sent increasingly threatening messages about guardianship petitions and medical necessity hearings, while Vanessa left voicemails about my unstable behavior, I quietly gathered every piece of evidence we needed. The detective Patricia hired found even more. Vanessa had been meeting with a realtor, showing them photos of our house, getting appraisals. Marcus had opened credit cards in anticipation of inheritance funding. They'd even picked out a vacation home in Hilton Head they planned to buy once everything settled. They were counting money while my husband fought for his life. On the morning I received formal notice that Marcus was filing for emergency guardianship, claiming I was a danger to myself and my spouse through irrational decision-making, I finally called him back. "Mom," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I'm glad you called. We need to talk about the petition. It's not personal. It's just—" "I know what it is," I interrupted quietly. "I'm calling to tell you I'm not fighting it." Silence on the other end. "Then, you're not?" "No. I'm tired, Marcus. You win. I'll agree to the guardianship evaluation." I paused, letting the lie settle. "But I have one condition. I want to meet with you and Vanessa and the doctors. One last time. No lawyers. Just family. I want to discuss Dad's care plan together and come to an agreement before the court gets involved." That's great, Mom. Really. I'm proud of you for being reasonable." The meeting's scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. Hospital conference room. Dr. Chen will be there. Can you make it? Absolutely. We'll be there. After I hung up, Patricia smiled grimly. "You're a better actress than I expected." "I'm not acting," I said. "I really am tired. Tired of fighting my own child. Tired of protecting my husband from the son who should be protecting him. I'm tired of all of it." "Then let's end it," Patricia said. Thursday. We end it all. The conference room at St. Michael's Hospital felt smaller than it was, or perhaps it was just the weight of what was about to happen that made the walls seem closer. I sat at the polished table with my hands folded in my lap, watching Marcus and Vanessa walk in with the confident stride of people who thought they'd already won. Marcus wore his expensive suit like armor. Vanessa carried a designer bag that probably cost more than a month of Thomas's hospital bills. They sat across from me, their expressions carefully arranged into sympathy that didn't reach their eyes. Dr. Chen sat at the head of the table, but his usual gentle demeanor had been replaced by something harder. He'd read the evidence. He knew what we were really dealing with. Then Marcus noticed Patricia. "Mom," he said slowly, "I thought this was a family meeting. Why is there a lawyer here?" "Because this stopped being a family meeting 3 months ago," I replied, my voice steady. "Because you filed for guardianship without even telling me. Because you've been treating your father's medical crisis as a financial opportunity. And because I wanted witnesses for what happens next." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Here we go. The martyr act. Mom, we're here to help you, not hurt you. This paranoia is exactly why we're concerned about your mental state." "My mental state?" I almost smiled. "Is that what you're calling it? Not grief, not exhaustion, not the stress of watching my husband fight for his life while my own son undermines his care. Mental instability?" "Look," Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on that practiced reasonable tone, "I know you're upset about the guardianship petition. But it's for your own good, Mom. You're making emotional decisions instead of practical ones. You're refusing to accept reality about Dad's condition. The court will see. The court will see evidence," Patricia interrupted smoothly. "Which is why I'm here. To make sure everything that's said today is properly documented." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Fine. Let's talk evidence. Let's talk about Dad's prognosis." He turned to Dr. Chen. "Doctor, please be honest with my mother. What are the realistic chances of meaningful recovery?" Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral. "The chances of complete recovery are low. But Mr. Whitmore has shown consistent improvement. His oxygen levels are better. He's responding to stimuli. His latest EEG shows increased brain activity. I'm cautiously optimistic about continued progress." "Cautiously optimistic isn't a medical prognosis," Vanessa snapped. "It's a liability dodge. Give us numbers. Percentages." "Medicine doesn't work in percentages for individual cases," Dr. Chen replied calmly. "Every patient is different. What I can tell you is that Mr. Whitmore's current trajectory doesn't support withdrawing care. He's fighting. He's improving. To suggest otherwise would be medically irresponsible." Marcus's face flushed. "This is exactly the problem. Everyone's too afraid to tell the truth. Mom's spending thousands of dollars a week on this, draining their savings, for what? A vegetable who might, maybe, possibly wake up someday?" "Don't call him that," I said quietly. "Don't you dare call your father that." "Why not? It's the truth. His brain damaged beyond repair, and you're bankrupting yourself on false hope. Someone needs to make the hard decisions here, and since you won't, I have to. Hard decisions. I opened the folder Patricia had placed in front of me, my hands perfectly steady now. Let's talk about hard decisions. Let's talk about the recorded conversation Nurse Rebecca Chan captured 4 weeks ago, where you discussed guardianship strategies and calculated how much money you'd inherit once your father died. The color drained from Marcus's face. Let's talk about the tax fraud investigation opened by the state attorney's office yesterday morning, regarding the $40,000 loan your father gave you that you reported as gift income. Let's talk about the financial forensic audit showing you've been shopping for vacation homes while your father fights for his life. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus sat frozen, staring at the documents spreading across the table like accusations. This is... Marcus struggled to form words. You've been investigating us? Your own son? You've been planning to steal from me and kill your father, I replied, my voice hard. So yes, I investigated. And what I found? I paused, letting the weight of it settle. What I found broke my heart. Patricia took over, her voice crisp and professional. Here's what's going to happen. The guardianship petition will be withdrawn immediately. Marcus and Vanessa will sign a legally binding agreement not to interfere with Mr. Whitmore's medical care. The $40,000 loan will be repaid in full within 90 days, with interest. And she placed a final document on the table. You will both sign this non-contact order, agreeing to stay away from Mrs. Whitmore and her husband unless explicitly invited. Or, Marcus's voice came out strangled. Or I file criminal charges for fraud, harassment, and elder financial abuse. The evidence is overwhelming. You'll face up to 5 years in prison, Marcus. Your law license, the one your father's tuition money paid for, will be revoked. Your wife's social media influencer career will be destroyed when the press gets hold of this story. And most importantly, you'll lose any chance of ever rebuilding a relationship with your father if he recovers. When he recovers, I corrected softly. Because he is recovering, Marcus. Despite your best efforts to convince everyone otherwise, despite your calculations and schemes, your father is fighting his way back. And when he wakes up, if he wakes up, I will have to decide whether to tell him what you tried to do. The silence in the room was absolute. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice shaking. You can't do this. We're family. Family, I repeated. The word felt hollow. Is that what you think this is? Family doesn't measure inheritance before the funeral. Family doesn't hire lawyers to steal guardianship. Family doesn't, my voice finally cracked, family doesn't pray for death so they can buy a beach house. Marcus's eyes were wet. For the first time in months, I saw something real in his face. Shame, maybe. Or fear. Or both. Mom, it wasn't supposed to be like this. How was it supposed to be? I asked. You were supposed to convince me gently. Talk me into killing my own husband gradually instead of all at once. Make me think it was my idea to sell our home and let him die alone in some facility. We just wanted to help. You wanted money. I slammed my hand on the table, surprising everyone including myself. Don't lie to me anymore, Marcus. Don't pretend this was about my well-being or your father's dignity. You saw an opportunity to inherit early, and you took it. You calculated the cost of compassion and decided it was too expensive. Patricia placed a pen on top of the documents. You have 2 options. Sign these agreements right now, accept the consequences, and maybe earn your way back into your parents' lives someday. Or refuse, face criminal charges, and lose everything. This isn't fair, Vanessa whispered. No, I agreed. It's not. None of this is fair. It's not fair that your husband tried to kill his father for money. It's not fair that I have to fight my own child while my husband fights for his life. It's not fair that the house we built with our own hands, the life we created together, has been reduced to a real estate listing you were shopping around. Nothing about this is fair. I stood up, looking down at them both. But it ends today. You sign those papers, or I destroy you. That's the only choice you have left. Marcus reached for the pen with a shaking hand. They signed. Every page, every clause, every stipulation. Marcus's hand trembled as he wrote his name, each signature a confession of guilt he couldn't take back. Vanessa cried, her mascara running in black streams down her carefully made-up face, but she signed too. Dr. Chen witnessed the documents. Patricia notarized them. And just like that, the papers that could have destroyed Thomas's care and stolen our home became legally binding promises that my son would stay away unless invited. The loan repayment begins Monday, Patricia said, collecting the signed documents. First installment of $5,000, then monthly payments until the full $40,000 plus interest is satisfied. Miss a payment, and the criminal charges get filed automatically. We don't have $5,000, Vanessa said through her tears. You have a car worth $30,000, I replied coldly. You have designer handbags worth thousands. You have that beach house fund you've been building. I suggest you figure it out. Marcus finally looked up at me, his eyes red. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The bills were piling up, and we'd made plans, and I convinced myself that Dad was gone anyway, so you thought you could harvest his corpse, I finished. Except he's not a corpse, Marcus. He's your father. And every day I sit beside his bed, I see him getting stronger. Yesterday, he opened his eyes for 10 seconds. Last week, he squeezed my hand when I asked him to. He's fighting his way back from the edge of death, and you were trying to push him over. I know. Marcus's voice broke. I know, and I hate myself for it. I don't know what happened to me. How I became someone who could think like this, plan like this. I know what happened, I said quietly. You stopped seeing people and started seeing dollar signs. You stopped valuing your father's life and started calculating his death. You let money become more important than love. And that's a choice, Marcus. A choice you made every single day for 4 months. He nodded, unable to speak. Leave, I said. Both of you. And don't come back until you've figured out how to be human beings again. They left. Vanessa sobbing, Marcus silent and grey-faced, walking out of that conference room like condemned prisoners leaving a sentencing hearing. After they were gone, I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. Patricia placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, she said. Hard, but right. Did I? I looked at the pile of legal documents, each one a barrier between my son and me. I just destroyed my relationship with my only child. He destroyed it when he started treating his father like a financial asset, Dr. Chen said quietly. You just protected yourself and your husband. There's no shame in that. But it felt like shame. It felt like failure. I'd raised that boy, loved him, sacrificed for him, and somehow he'd become someone I barely recognized. Later that evening, sitting beside Thomas's bed as the sun set through the hospital window, I told him everything. I knew he probably couldn't hear me, couldn't understand, but I needed to say it aloud. I don't know if I was too soft on him growing up, or too hard, I whispered, holding his warm hand. I don't know where we went wrong, where he learned that money matters more than people. Was it us? Was it something we did? Thomas didn't answer. But his heart monitor beeped steadily, and his chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, and I found comfort in that persistence. The next morning, something unexpected happened. I arrived at the hospital to find Rebecca waiting outside Thomas's room, her face lit with cautious excitement. He's awake, she said. Not fully conscious, not talking yet, but his tracking movement with his eyes. Responding to commands. Mrs. Whitmore, he turned his head when Dr. Chen said your name. I rushed inside to find Dr. Chen standing beside Thomas's bed, and my husband, my beautiful, stubborn husband, looking at me with clear, aware eyes. Thomas, I breathed, taking his hand. Can you squeeze my hand if you hear me? His fingers tightened around mine. Weak, but deliberate. I burst into tears, 4 months of terror and exhaustion and rage pouring out all at once. You're back. You're really back. Dr. Chen smiled. It's early yet. He's still on the ventilator, still has a long recovery ahead. But this is excellent progress. Better than I dared hope, honestly. Over the following weeks, Thomas improved steadily. They reduced his sedation. He started breathing over the ventilator on his own. Eventually, they removed it entirely, though he needed supplemental oxygen and could barely whisper. But he was alive. Aware. Present. And he kept asking about Marcus. "Where's our boy?" he rasped one afternoon, his voice scratchy from weeks of intubation. "Haven't seen him." I'd been dreading this question. I'd prepared answers, rehearsed explanations. But looking into Thomas's concerned eyes, I couldn't lie. "He's not coming right now," I said carefully. There were some problems while you were sick. Some difficult conversations. He needs some time." "Problems?" Thomas's face creased with worry. "Is he okay?" "He will be," I said, squeezing his hand. "But right now, he needs to work through some things. And you need to focus on getting better." Thomas studied my face with the intensity of someone reading a familiar book. After 43 years together, he could read my silences as clearly as my words. "What did he do?" Thomas asked quietly. "Nothing that can't be fixed," I lied. Then, because I owed him honesty, eventually. "Maybe. If he wants to fix it." A week later, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Marcus's therapist. He's given me permission to reach out. He'd like to see his father if that's acceptable to you. He understands there are conditions and consequences. He's not asking for forgiveness yet. Just a chance to start making amends." I showed the message to Thomas, who was now in a rehabilitation facility working on physical therapy. His strength was returning slowly, but his mind was sharp. "What did he do, Janet?" Thomas asked again. "It must have been bad if we need therapists as intermediaries." So I told him. Everything. The calls about selling the house, the guardianship threats, the calculation of our worth in dollar signs. I showed him the documents, played him the recordings, walked him through 4 months of betrayal. Thomas cried. This man who'd served in Desert Storm, who'd lost his own father at age 12, who'd stayed stoic through our darkest times, he wept like a child. "My boy," he whispered. "What happened to my boy?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But he's trying to find his way back. The question is whether we want to help him, or whether some bridges burn too completely to rebuild." Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then, I spent my whole life teaching him to value things that last. Family. Integrity. Love. And he threw it away for money he hadn't even inherited yet. He looked at me with ancient sadness in his eyes. "But he's still our son. And if he's genuinely trying to change, to understand what he did wrong, don't we owe him that chance? Even after everything? Especially after everything. Because that's what real love is, Janet. Not the easy love when people are perfect. The hard love when they're broken and trying to put themselves back together." He squeezed my hand. "We don't have to trust him. We don't have to forget. But maybe we can leave a door cracked open. Just in case." 6 months after Thomas woke up, we held a small gathering at the house on Maple Street. Not a celebration exactly, too much pain still lingered for that, but an acknowledgement. Thomas was home. Walking with a cane, needing afternoon naps, dealing with some memory lapses. But alive. Present. Himself. The house hadn't been sold. The mortgage wasn't in question. The garden I'd maintained throughout the crisis was blooming again, roses Thomas planted decades ago filling the air with their sweet scent. Marcus and Vanessa were not there. We'd met with them 3 times over those 6 months, always in the therapist's office, always with clear boundaries. Marcus had repaid the loan in full. He'd written a letter to his father not asking forgiveness but acknowledging the depths of his failure. He'd started donating to hospice care organizations and elder advocacy groups, trying to balance the karma he'd destroyed. But trust, once shattered, takes years to rebuild. Maybe lifetimes. "Do you think he'll ever really change?" I asked Thomas one evening, sitting on the porch swing where we'd spent 1,000 summer nights over the decades. "I think he's trying," Thomas said carefully. "Whether he succeeds or not, whether we ever have a real relationship with him again, that's up to him. We've done all we can do. We've set boundaries, protected ourselves, offered the possibility of reconciliation if he does the work. The rest is his choice. I keep thinking about how close we came, I admitted. How close I came to losing you, and losing the house, and losing everything we built together. But you didn't. Thomas took my hand, his grip still weaker than it used to be but steady. You fought for us. For me. You were stronger than anyone knew, including you. He was right. I hadn't known I had that strength. I'd spent decades as Thomas's partner, Marcus's mother, someone defined by relationships and roles. I'd been Janet Whitmore, wife and mother, competent but not remarkable. But when crisis came, when my family fractured and my son revealed his worst self, I'd found something I didn't know I possessed: steel. The ability to stand alone. To make hard decisions. To protect what mattered even when it meant losing people I loved. I learned something, I said slowly, watching fireflies appear in the darkening garden. About the difference between being kind and being weak. About when to forgive and when to protect yourself. About how love sometimes means saying no. That's wisdom, Thomas said. Expensive wisdom, but the most valuable kind. We sat in comfortable silence, the evening air cooling around us, the sounds of our neighborhood settling into twilight. Somewhere down the street, children laughed. A dog barked. Life continued, indifferent to our dramas and struggles. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus: Dad's birthday next month. Would it be okay if I sent a card? Not asking to visit. Just want him to know I'm thinking of him. I showed Thomas the message. He read it, sighed, then nodded. A card is fine. Small steps. Maybe that's all we could hope for now. Small steps. Tiny repairs in a foundation that had cracked down to its core. Maybe someday the house of our family could be rebuilt. Or maybe it couldn't. Maybe some breaks are permanent, and the best we can do is learn to live with the scars. But we had our home. We had each other. We had the life we'd built together, defended against all threats including the ones that came from within. And in the end, that was enough. That night, lying in our own bed for the first time in 6 months, Thomas turned to me in the darkness. Thank you, he whispered. For not giving up. For fighting when I couldn't fight. For protecting us when our own child became the threat. That's what love is, I said, echoing his words from months ago. The hard kind. The kind that makes impossible choices and lives with the consequences. We fell asleep holding hands, the way we had for 43 years, the way we would for however many years we had left. And in the morning, I'd wake up in the house we built together, make coffee in the kitchen where we'd raised our son, and tend the roses Thomas planted for our anniversaries. Because some things, the important things, aren't measured in dollars or calculated in inheritance. They're measured in the years you fight to keep them. In the boundaries you defend. In the dignity you refuse to surrender. And in the strength you discover when you have to stand alone against people who should have stood beside you. That's the lesson I learned in those 4 months of crisis. You can lose everything and still be whole. You can be betrayed by the people you love most and still have worth. You can face down greed and manipulation and legal threats, and emerge not broken but tempered. Because real strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up when everything in you wants to stay down. It's about protecting what matters when the cost of protection is everything you have. It's about choosing dignity over desperation, boundaries over enabling, self-respect over peace at any price. And sometimes, the hardest lesson of all, it's about accepting that loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. 6 months after Thomas came home, on a crisp October morning, I stood in my garden among the roses and realized something profound. I'd thought I was fighting to save my husband. But I'd also saved myself. From becoming a victim. From accepting cruelty as love. From believing that family loyalty meant sacrificing everything, even your own dignity, on the altar of someone else's greed. Thomas was alive. Our home was secure. Our life together continued. And I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone's worst self destroy what matters most. That's not cruelty. That's not selfishness. That's survival. That's dignity. That's love in its truest, hardest, most essential form. And I would never apologize for it.